It's been a few days since Japan's earthquake maxed out the seismic scale, and the story everyone's already stopped watching is the one that actually matters. Because right now, seismologists are staring at a map, watching for one specific pattern that decided whether this sequence was ending or just getting started 10 years ago. Keep watching, because that map is still filling in. In the towns of Uki and Haikawa, families are still sleeping in evacuation centers, in cars, in gymnasiums, because their houses are still standing but nobody's sure for how long. Cracks run through walls that held during the initial shake, retaining walls or leaning at angles they weren't built for. Roughly 150,000 people left their homes in the first hours. Days later, a large share still haven't gone back, not because officials are being cautious, because this specific stretch of Kyushu has a documented habit of getting worse before it gets better. The Japan Meteorological Agency logged the strongest possible reading on their intensity scale, a Shindo 7, in 2 towns south of Kumamoto City. That scale runs 0 to 7. There is no 8. It's been hit only 8 times in the entire instrumented era, and 3 of those 8 now belong to this single prefecture. The agency's own guidance, rewritten after the last disaster here, said a quake of similar scale could follow within about a week. Days into that window, the map they're watching hasn't given them an answer yet. Here's the part that makes this dangerous rather than just loud. Think of a cracked window. The first hit doesn't shatter it, it just spreads a hairline fracture across the glass. The window still looks fine. It's still standing. But it takes almost nothing to finish the job the second time. That's what happened to entire neighborhoods in Kumamoto. Buildings absorbed the initial quake and cracked instead of collapsing. They're standing right now. They're also weaker than they've ever been, waiting for a second hit that wouldn't have touched them a week ago. The tidy version of this story writes itself. A 7.1 hit, it was severe. Aftershocks are following the normal pattern of shrinking over time, and within a week or two, this fades into the background the way most sequences do. The odds even back that up. Most sequences never produce anything bigger than the first big shock. It's clean, it's reassuring, and it's not the whole picture. Because this exact fault system already ran this experiment once in April 2016. A magnitude 6.5 hit. Seismologists treated it as the main event. Emergency response mobilized, and people who'd evacuated started going back into their homes to check on things. 28 hours later, a magnitude 7.3, bigger than the first, tore through the same structure. The earthquake everyone called the main shock got reclassified afterward as a foreshock. Nobody knew it was a foreshock while it was happening. Nobody ever does. That's the map I mentioned at the start, and here's what it actually shows. If the aftershocks stay clustered tight around the original rupture, that's a sequence burning itself out on schedule. If the epicenter starts stretching outward, northeast or southwest along the fault line, that's stress finding a new segment to load. That stretching pattern, not the raw quake count, is the thing that preceded the escalation in 2016. Days in, that map is still filling in one dot at a time, and nobody gets to skip to the end of it. The receipts on this fault go back further than 2016. On July 28, 1889, on the same calendar date this new sequence began, a 6.3 struck the same prefecture, killed around 20 people, and tore apart part of Kumamoto Castle. That's a coincidence of the calendar, not a pattern. But 2016 is not a coincidence, and it's the sequence Japan's disaster planners are actively working from right now. That sequence killed 276 people. A meaningful share of those deaths came from buildings that survived the first quake and failed on the second, with rescue crews pulled off active digs mid-search when the ground moved again. Run the math seismologists actually use. Both's law says the largest aftershock in a sequence typically lands 1.1 to 1.2 magnitude units below the initial rupture. Applied here, that puts the expected ceiling somewhere around magnitude 6. That's not a forecast, it's a baseline. And after 2016, nobody in Japan treats a baseline as a limit. Each step up the magnitude scale represents roughly 32 times more energy. which is why a jump from 7.1 to something in the low sevens sounds modest on paper and catastrophic to a wall that's already half down. The second hit doesn't need to match the first. It only needs to finish what the first one started. Let's separate what's actually confirmed from what's interpretation and what's still open. Confirmed. The fault produced a 7.1, maxed the intensity scale twice in one prefecture's history, and this same structure produced a bigger, deadlier quake 28 hours after its 2016 predecessor. Interpretation. That the current sequence carries elevated risk of a similar repeat based on statistical patterns, not on any signal that can see the future. Open. Whether the aftershock map keeps clustering tight or starts to stretch, and days in, nobody, no instrument, no agency can answer that yet. The Japan Meteorological Agency has been explicit about this. Their own guidance stopped promising aftershocks only get smaller because Kumamoto proved that assumption can kill. It would be easy and wrong to assume that because a few days have passed without a repeat, the danger has quietly expired. That's not how this works. The 2016 sequence didn't wait a convenient amount of time either. It waited exactly 28 hours, which felt like nothing and everything at once. A few quiet days on the surface can look identical to a few quiet days before the map starts stretching. The absence of a second quake so far is not the same thing as the absence of risk. If you have family in Kumamoto or anywhere along this fault corridor, the days right now matter more than the day the earthquake actually hit. The advice from officials hasn't changed. Stay out of damaged buildings, keep clear of slopes and retaining walls that took the initial hit, and treat the remaining days of this window as live, not as a formality. The people who left early when told to leave are the ones who had time. The people who waited to see how things developed are the ones who needed to be rescued. That's not a guess. That's what the last decade of data from this exact ground says happened. The mall in Uki is still being searched. The aftershock count keeps climbing, each one smaller than the last, exactly the way a normal sequence is supposed to behave, right up until the moment it doesn't. Somewhere under Kumamoto, the same rock that broke twice a decade ago is doing the same slow calculation it did in 2016. And nobody, not the instruments, not the agencies, not the people still sleeping in their cars, gets to see the answer before it arrives. The map is still filling in. The window isn't closed yet. And that's the part worth sitting with for a second. Not the fear of it, just the honesty of it. Nobody gets to fast forward through the next few days and find out early. Not the seismologists running the numbers, not the officials issuing the guidance, not you watching this right now. The only thing anyone actually has is the pattern from last time. And the pattern from last time says, the quiet part is not the same thing as the safe part. So if you're anywhere near this fault, or you know someone who is, the answer isn't to panic. It's to stay ready the way this region has learned, at real cost, how to stay ready.